afternoon and welcome to this Rittenhouse Open Online Learning course. We're glad that you took some time this afternoon to join us for a recap of Electronic Resources and Libraries 2020. We realize that everyone is operating under a temporary new normal, and we are grateful for your time and attention. I'm going to give one more moment here to let folks log on, and then we'll get started. These sessions typically last about a half an hour, so we're grateful for you taking the time to join us today, and hopefully we can share some relevant information from ER&L, and then also some information about how Rittenhouse can help you to transition your users in your environment and adapt to the ever-changing world of COVID-19. So, all right, I'll get started here. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Meg White. I am the Director of Technology Services at Rittenhouse Book Distributors. I'm joined today by Nicole Gallo, who is the Director of Sales and Marketing at Rittenhouse Book Distributors. And Nicole will be assisting with the Q&A portion and also helping me with making sure our technology runs smoothly. So just some housekeeping quickly. This session will be recorded and made available on the Rittenhouse YouTube channel. The audio is muted for participants, so we do encourage your participation. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A tool on your GoToWebinar toolbar, and we will reserve time at the end of this session for Q&A. Just a word about the Rittenhouse YouTube channel. In a working remote environment, Rittenhouse YouTube channel can be a great source of information. We do archive all of our online courses there. Some of them are Rittenhouse specific with regard to our tools and services, but many of them are more global in nature and can be good resources if you are looking to do staff training or in-service while your teams are scattered and working remotely from home. So Rittenhouse YouTube channel, a good resource for you and your staff as you're trying to recalibrate your workday from a remote environment. Today's agenda, we'll get a quick primer on ER&L, what this meeting is about. We'll discuss some takeaways from the recent conference, which was held March 8th through the 11th in Austin, Texas. And then finally, just reminders and links to Rittenhouse resources and other resources to help with COVID-19 disruptions and challenges. So ER&L, really in a nutshell, this meeting was founded in 2004 to address the challenges and opportunities created by the expansion of electronic information. The first conference that the organization actually hosted was in 2005. And quickly from the ER&L website, this group convenes a conference and online learning opportunity to support the improvement of the way libraries collect, manage, maintain, and make accessible electronic resources. So this really is a collaboration between librarians, vendors, and publishers. Back in the day, it was Brave New World. What is an electronic collection? How do we manage it? And of course, this conference has been a big part of iterating those systems and processes over time. If you're doing your math, you might have discerned this was the 15th ER&L conference. So congratulations certainly to Bonnie, Tirina, and the hundreds, if not thousands, of professionals who have made ER&L successful and definitely impactful over the last 15 years. Congratulations to those folks. So 2020 key topics and themes. This was my first time attending this conference, either in person or remotely, and I was in Austin for 3 days. There was some cancellations, but a fairly large contingent. This was before many of the major travel bans were announced. So my impressions of this is a very practical conference. Most of the presentations were focused on big topics, ERM, authentication, library, and skill sets in an electronic environment, but many of them addressed them through a very hands-on approach. So in other words, many speakers walk the walk and they talk the talk. I am fortunate enough to be on a committee for another large industry conference, acquisitions conference, And a lot of times the talks that you get at these kinds of gatherings will be of one type or another. So they're either big ideas, macro concepts, very, very global and wide, or they are very, very practical and hands-on focused. This conference, I really felt like did a good job of painting the big picture, but then also having the speakers fill in those details. And a good combination of this is the big challenge, but here are some ways that we actually tackled this challenge within our environment. So you saw a lot of insights and data from real world implementations. And importantly too, folks really were they were sharing successes for sure, but they were also not afraid to share some failings and what they learned. And I really thought that made this conference unique. And I think the speakers did a good job at balancing those things. So with that, can't go on to mention, we often hear talk and perhaps have read professionally about how environment can influence our work and how our work environments can in many ways color how we function as an organization within our environment. Well, the AT&T Conference Center where this conference is held is absolutely new, beautiful, and state-of-the-art. It was perfectly configured for the keynotes, the breakout sessions, the exhibits, the meals. And I really looked around while I was there and said, well, this is Texas. Everything is big, everything is bold, everything is better. And this conference center, which is on the campus itself of UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin, really embodies that. It is worth saying, though, that ER&L is one of the first conferences, certainly within this industry, that offers both an in-person experience and an online experience. And this experience was available to attendees, registrants, prior to some of the challenges which had just started surfacing in the last couple of weeks leading up to the conference, having to do with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So they offer, just as a default, a full online in-person registration or a full online registration, offline and online. I've gotten myself confused. They did, of course, in the weeks leading up to ER&L, offer in-person registrants the opportunity to register for the online experience at the reduced price. So they did offer that. But if you can't make it to the AT&T Center, you can always attend this conference virtually. So that is good news, and again, makes this conference somewhat unique. So on to takeaways. Takeaway number one, the best keynote is one that makes you think. And the keynote for this conference certainly made the attendees online or present in the room think. The keynote was delivered by Barbara Pfister, who is the scholar in residence at Project Information Literacy. And the context of her speech was she presented data from a Project Information Literacy 10-year study, so a very longitudinal study of student and faculty information seeking behavior in the age of algorithms. How do students and faculty find their information? How do they use their information? What are their thoughts about the information that they need to do their scholarly work? So that data, I think in and of itself would have been fascinating, but Barbara really went back and gave some historical context to the moment in which we find ourselves. Specifically, in a knowledge environment and knowledge economy, data becomes a very, very valuable, I don't want to say commodity because that lessens it, but a very, very valuable resource. And she went back contextually and made an analogy between data in a knowledge economy and oil in a manufacturing economy. So if data is in fact the new oil in the knowledge economy, what does that mean for society? And specifically, she discussed the fact that in the past, these types of moments can create large areas of inequity and injustice within society. These, oil potentially was used to create well, a robust economy, that economy perhaps wasn't distributed as equally as it possibly could have been across all the societies. And she brought that analogy forward to talk about data and some of the ways that it could be used not to bring about more equality, more social justice, but ways it could be co-opted to actually work against those factors in our society. So it was fascinating, and I do encourage you to go online and watch this talk. I really felt privileged just to be in the audience, just very, very provocative and very, very thought-provoking, which, that to me is a good keynote. It makes you think. She specifically ended with challenges to the audience about how librarians can help in this new knowledge economy, specifically with regard to issues about privacy, equity, social responsibility, and education for democracy. And she, of course, feels like libraries have a very important role to play. So I would encourage you, it was a fantastic talk. Please do, if you have a moment, go online and look at that talk. It was well worth hearing, and certainly I felt honored to be able to be in the audience. Takeaway 2. Infrastructure, staffing, and skill sets are starting to mirror the new landscape. Slowly but surely, operationally, culturally, libraries are really starting to codify some of these new systems, new cultures, new skill sets needed to manage new kinds of collections, and more importantly, new kinds of user needs. So there were many sessions at this conference on authentication, automation, even strategic alignment of staffing resources. One of the librarians from Yale actually presented organizational charts before and after of how they have really transformed their staff to address some of the new needs and new skill sets to manage their collections and make sure they're meeting user needs. For libraries, the takeaway there, and heard this loud and clear, still, even though been iterating on this for about 15 years, still juggling way too many operational balls. Purchase models, multiple purchase models, diverse purchase models, new purchase models every day of the week. There was even one session where one large ER&L spoke up. They currently support 5 different authentication types for their electronic resources. 5. Obviously not sustainable. So I think maybe the next big thing coming will be some codification around some of these operational issues, and hopefully some of these things will merge together and we'll get some more transparency, maybe not the right word, more simplicity with regard to how these systems and standards work. Overwhelmingly, too, I think for libraries, I heard this loud and clear from the platform. Certainly this was important to me, being on the vendor side. Many libraries are not very happy with the tools that are being provided to manage some of these operational issues. Obviously, if you're having to use 5 authentication models to make sure your users can access your library's resources, you're not happy with that system. That's a tremendous duplication when perhaps it doesn't need to be just duplication of resources to support all 5 of those instances. One hot topic to answer that question was open source. And I don't know if the audience is familiar with Folio, but there was a lot of talk about Folio, which is an open source library services platform. A lot of folks were there. I was talking with folks in the shuttle one morning on the way over to the meeting, and they were from a 4-year academic library and 3 different libraries, and all 3 were there specifically to learn more about libraries that are implementing Folio as their library management system. So that was very interesting to see. So I think that given the fact that librarians were voicing displeasure with the tools that were currently available to them commercially, the fact that they were considering moving to open source, I think, was a very important takeaway from this conference. I will say, having been at the NISO conference a few weeks ago in Baltimore, maybe a month ago now, there was a comment made from the podium about open source software in general, and it's a funny one, it's witty, and I'll repeat it here today. Open source software is more like free puppies than free beer. So meaning that if you're going to go the route of open source, there are considerations in terms of long-term care and feeding of said open source software then might immediately be available or be apparent when you make the decision to go with that software. So just something that's definitely a hot topic now. A buzzword is folio, but from a practical perspective, in a resource-constrained environment, just be wary of something that does and will have continuing, ongoing care and feeding. So, takeaway 3. This was a fascinating session, and I gave it kind of a big slide here. The big deal is dead. Long live the big deal. Tim Bucknall from the Carolina Consortia gave a presentation that dispelled many myths around the big deal, and he did that using data, actual data from his consortia group. I'm not going to go back and go through the myths that he dispelled based on their group's experience. What I will do on this slide is to outline some of the things that the Carolina Consortium experienced with their big deals in a positive light, or in not necessarily positive, but what they actually did learn from their data. And that is that big deals are diverse, complicated, often oversimplified and misunderstood. Per their data at the Carolina Consortium, big deals are good for some and they are bad for others. So the takeaway really from this session was, and it's particularly interesting in a world where we have to be very, very careful to scrutinize what might become popular myths, perpetuating unsupported myths that may fit a narrative that is simply not always true. So, we live in an environment where big deal bad, transformative agreement good. And I think the point of this talk was that may be a very convenient narrative, but we really have to be careful to dig in and look at the facts in each individual situation, and making that kind of a blanket statement may or may not always be helpful or additive. So I thought this was a fascinating look at sort of intended to be the reality of the situation, and I thought that the data, especially that Tim delivered to support his position, was actually pretty fascinating. So again, the big deal is dead. It may be the prevailing myth or sentiment that we see, and California cancels their big deal and European countries canceled their big deal, but be mindful of the fact that they are based on your library, your situation, may or may not be true for each individual institution. So a bonus takeaway from the meeting, this conference absolutely remembers to have fun. There were 2 sessions, one Family Feud and one Jeopardy, and they were lighthearted, but they were informative. So some of the answers in Jeopardy were, what is ORCID? Or what is SAML authentication? So they were fun and interesting, these sessions, but they were also very, you learned something absolutely from sitting in the audience. And I will say, for the folks on the phone today, the Jeopardy champ is a librarian. There was a vendor on the panel, a publisher and a librarian, and Laurel Crawford, who is at the University of North Texas, was a very successful Jeopardy player. Not only knew the answers to the questions, but also managed her money very successfully. So many of you probably aren't surprised at that. And she was crowned the Jeopardy champ at ER&L 2020. So just as a final word here, and this is an update as of yesterday, March 18th, effective immediately, ER&L is enabling free access to the complete online conference videos. So the link is here on the slide, or if you would go to the ER&L website, the entire conference is being made available. And I just got this update yesterday in my email prior to the time that we had scheduled this webinar. So if you're interested in any of the topics specifically, you can certainly browse the program and you can access any of the conference content online at no charge. So they are encouraging folks to use these sessions as a resource in whatever way might be helpful to you. I would really encourage you, please take a look at the Keynote address. It is absolutely fascinating for any number of reasons. So with that, I'm going to bounce it over to Nicole for your questions. And again, you can submit questions that you might have using the GoToWebinar question tool, or you can email customerservice@r2library.com. So Nicole, do we have any questions?
Sure. One question came in regarding the new org charts that were discussed, and a question around what were some of the new positions in the library that were discussed in the org chart?
Oh, wow. You know, my memory is failing there right now, but I will say there were significant changes, and it was basically a redeployment of resources. Formerly, people were purely technical services. That department went away, and more folks were involved with supporting not only the selection of electronic resources, but also the discovery and integration of those electronic resources across this was an academic library at Yale, across the campus and across the curriculum. So whereas in the past in technical services, it might be the completion of that department's job to make sure that the book got on the shelf and cataloged appropriately, they definitely added staff to extend that in terms of integration into the curriculum and various learning management tools that they had on the campus. So I don't want to misspeak, but now that this presentation is fully online and available, please encourage you to go to the ER&L website. It was Jennifer, I'm going to mispronounce her name, Bazzelli, who was from Yale, who actually was very generous with her information, including the organizational chart. So I'm sure they're there in her slides.
Great. Another question has come in about publishers, and are publishers experimenting with any new business models, I guess with regard to electronic content?
I think that the biggest thing that was discussed at the conference was transformative agreements. There were certainly a lot of questions just during Tim Bucknall's session about the big deal, juxtaposing the big deal and transformative agreements. And I think that I discussed this on the slide, but the takeaway was that as convenient as it might be, one size to live by this, one size just does not fit all. So I think that transformative agreements were certainly discussed as a new type of business model. I did hear in several sessions, and it made reference to this also, libraries would prefer to be able to keep things more simple than they currently are. And personally, I think that that's going to iterate over time. And I think we've already seen that iterate over time. I don't think we're done. I think there are still too many little wrinkles. So I would hope that maybe those pricing models or business models would continue to streamline. Certainly the librarians at this conference, that was their overwhelming sentiment, for sure.
Okay, that's it on the questions. If anyone else has a question, feel free to enter it as we finish up the session here, and we'll definitely email you back at the close of the webinar.
All right, and please do, there's just one more piece of information here before we sign off, but you all may be familiar with the NLM Lit COVID website that they have stood up quickly. This is access to a curated collection of relevant articles from PubMed. So I just put the URL here on the slide. You can access it at the NCBI, but this is being continuously updated by the National Library of Medicine. And a resource for you and certainly for the users within your community who are involved in either treating or working on, research surrounding containing and treating this virus. Rittenhouse specifically, you may have seen this in your email, we are offering for non-R2 account holders free 60-day trials. That gets you access to every title that's in the R2 library database for 60 days. I will just, as a reminder for folks who do or do not have an R2 library collection, we do offer open access titles as part of the R2 library. That includes the Merck Manual 20th edition. So if you have an active collection and you haven't looked at the open access books, including the Merck Manual, this may be a good time to do that. And if you don't have an R2 collection and would like access to those open R2 titles, we are waiving the annual fee for the OER resources only collection. So you can either do a free trial, which would get you access to those books, or you can actually start a collection with just free titles, and there's no net cost to you or to your library. And then finally, if you have an active collection, the patron-driven acquisition model is an easy way to open new titles at no financial risk as well. So you can open any title on the R2 library platform that's available, and your users will get 3 accesses of that title at no charge. So, a great way to open additional content which may be relevant in this environment to your users that might not have been appropriate prior to these extraordinary times. So that's a summary of what we are able to do working with our publisher partners to support you and certainly your clinicians and in an academic environment, faculty and students who are making huge adjustments in their day-to-day learning. So that's that. So before we log off, Nicole, any other questions that have come in?
No, we're good to go.
Good to go. Okay. Well, we thank you for being with us today. This session will be on our YouTube channel. And again, for more information or even to view the entire program, you can go onto the ER&L website and access the full conference. You can contact me here, Meg White at Rittenhouse.com, with any follow-up questions or comments. And we wish you, your colleagues, and your families the very, very best as we all struggle with this new normal. It is, I think, everyone's ardent hope that we all do our part and we come out of this on the other side as soon as possible. So be well. Please remember that we're here to support you, and we thank you for joining us today. Take care.